Welcome to another episode of Due Diligence, a real estate podcast. And we're back here in our North Atlanta studios. Just another week, another week of quarantine, yet another week of robust real estate home showings. And the world goes on. I'm here with my colleague, Lee Taylor.
Indeed.
What's up, buddy?
I saw a real estate coach that I'm not going to name, Jason, use the word quality. He said, "This is time we call quality." Are you kidding me?
Sounds like some sort of hokey shit.
That's not what Tom Ferry or Brian Buffini or a reputable coach said, but they call it quality.
We're back, and for the second week in a row, we're doing the Zoom Live. We're in our gallery format, and this is Lee Taylor. I'm Jason Wieloch, real estate experts from the Wieloch Group at Compass here in Atlanta, and we're here weekly to talk to you about relevant housing and real estate related topics that are on a micro level here, and then also now we're doing the guest thing quite often.
New game, Jason. We got guests now. We got guests now.
And so this afternoon, I felt like New York City is definitely one of the foremost places on people's minds, wouldn't you say?
No kidding.
And so we're going to introduce a gentleman who I've gotten to know really well since I've come to Compass the last couple of years. And he is one of the leading real estate experts in New York City, in my opinion. His name is Mike Sandak. And I'm going to bring him on the show right now.
Let's
say
do it.
Hello. Where's he at?
There he is.
Michael, what's up, buddy?
How are you?
Good, man. What's going on? How's quarantine up there in the Big Apple?
It's a brave new world we're living in, that's for sure. It's been okay. It's certainly a little bit crazy. Most things are shut down and we're sheltering in place. But generally speaking, it's a city of survivors, and people are doing what they have to do. And hopefully all of us across the entire world at this point, right, we'll get through this sooner than later, and things will, hopefully get back to normal at some point soon.
For sure, man. Well, Tell everybody, give our listeners here in Atlanta, who I know are interested in hearing from you what's going on, but tell them briefly, who is Michael Sandak?
So I am a residential real estate agent up here in New York. I've been in the business for going on 15 years. I started back at the beginning of 2006. I run a small team up here. I've been at Compass for about the last 4.5-5 years, and we're doing our thing up here.
Cool, man. And I've gotten to know you the last couple of years. I remember when I first came to Compass, just like Tiffany, who was on the show last week, our girl Tiffany down in Orlando. Met you in Los Angeles in November of 2018 when we put together really just a great referral group of agents. And for people out there that are looking for realtors across the country, Zillow can always sell one to you because somebody has the most ad space. Lee, you know that.
Mm-hmm.
But we've actually vetted out some of the best folks in the industry. And you're one of them. If anyone's moving to New York or they're moving away, I'm sure you can send them our way too. So,
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, man, of course. So I appreciate your perspective, and I know everyone has New York on their mind. So tell us a little bit about what's going on in that market.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, thank you guys for having me on. I'm a big fan. I love the podcast, and I appreciate you guys having me on. In terms of New York, I mean, what we're basically seeing right now, I think we're a little bit different, than some other markets. I know you guys are sort of open for business at the moment, and things are going, things are moving. It's different up here. So we are not considered an essential business up here. There are certain things that we're able to do, but we are, one prime example is we're not able to actually physically show apartments at the moment. And so that since there are no in-person showings, like most of the rest of the country, we've sort of started using things like Zoom. and other technology to do, different video conferences, video tours, things like that. Compass has come out with some great technology that helps with that as well. But I mean, just as an example, I had a bunch of landlords that I represent for rental properties that were starting to get a little bit antsy in terms of, hey, like, we have stuff that's coming up. When are we going to be able to show it? And they understand that we can't physically show the apartments. They're also, these are apartments where people are currently living. And so, the tenants really don't want people coming in and out to see the properties anyway. So over the last few days, we've listed a bunch of these properties online, and we've gotten some videos of them. I've taken some. I've asked tenants to take others if they prefer to do it without me coming in. And I got to tell you that we are getting a tremendous number of inquiries. I've been slammed for the past 2 or 3 days with people wanting to, move forward with these apartments, asking for applications, just as much data as I can give them: floor plans, pictures, videos, anything that will help them make that decision without physically seeing the apartment.
Go ahead.
Lee,
what
please.
neighborhoods?
So right now, the ones that we have up are pretty far from each other, actually. Like, one of the listings is up on the Upper East Side in Carnegie Hill, specifically on 96th and Madison. And then same landlord actually has a building in Meatpacking, right on the corner of 14th and Hudson. For those of you who know New York, you know that those are two vastly different neighborhoods. And the buildings certainly draw in very different types of people. Carnegie Hill is particularly a family-oriented neighborhood. So while, we have a mixture of different tenants in those buildings, we're getting calls from a lot of families for certain things, and we're getting calls from a lot of single people and shares for other things. We also have a listing up in Greenwich Village, which is, sort of the aesthetics a little bit more like Meatpacking than it would be the Upper East Side. But, all of these different neighborhoods, and we're getting calls on all of them.
How are you and the wife holding up?
We're doing well. You're doing well. I think it's funny, right? It's sort of, if you are in a relationship and you are home with your significant other, much more than you would usually be, it's an interesting experience, right? It could go one of two ways. Thankfully, things are going the right way for us. We've been enjoying the time together. I actually think that, for couples, this is probably a much easier experience than for, especially in New York. We have some single friends that are stuck in these studio apartments by themselves, and don't have any direct access to human touch at all. And I think that's probably really difficult. And then on the other end of things, I have a lot of friends that have kids. We don't. And our friends that have kids are busier than ever before. I mean, they're telling me they don't have a second to breathe between trying to do the homeschooling and keeping the children occupied. My own brother, who works on my team, by the way, he is home with a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old daughter in a New York City apartment. And, it's been a little rough. The 4-year-old, wants to run around and do things, and it's tough. And he is bringing her outside for periods of the day, but parks are closed up here and things like that, so they can't do that. They have to be really careful. On the other hand, my wife and I are like, let's learn Spanish with the extra time that we now have. So it's definitely been an interesting experience, and I think it varies.
You can open up new markets, nothing wrong with a little Spanish.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think what's interesting, and Lee, I have been watching these various markets pretty closely. Obviously, New York is the most impacted. It probably had the biggest pause, no doubt, for a period of time. Atlanta's been fairly resilient. I mean, even in the midst of shelter in place, a lot of home showings continued, and now they're really ramping up. I mean, it's almost to the point where you wouldn't even know there's a difference in terms of showing count. So, but I think that what you're seeing is that buyers are coming out of the woodwork. Sellers are staying home in many cases. So we already had a supply crunch, I know, here locally, and that could cause a ton of pent up demand. But New York was already kind of in a buyer's market. And Lee, you may have a follow up to this, but I'm curious how all of this will affect New York real estate positively or negatively in your mind, because on one hand, maybe pent up demand helps boost a market when things have to pause, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can ask
absolutely.
a question, or
Yeah, go ahead.
were prices in decline in New York prior to COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can give you guys a brief overview of sort of what was going on and what's going on now. Just to give you some statistics here. Um, we were, New York tends to lead the way in terms of what's going to happen across the country at some point in time, right? And things lag behind. Not every city is affected. I know, for example, Denver. Denver's been in a hot market for a really long time and has not seen any downturn in a really long
Yeah,
time.
dude.
There are definitely some markets that are super resilient right now in whatever cycle we're in. But in New York, we had seen 9 straight quarters of depreciation prior to COVID. I mean, the ninth quarter was the beginning of COVID, but we've already seen depreciation for a long time. And so in New York, we were, as Jason said, in a significant buyer's market. We were telling people a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, time to strike, because this is a buyer's market. Interest rates, as have been really low. When you combine the 9 straight quarters depreciation, the interest rates, we were already prior to COVID seeing a strong buyer's market. And so there was already opportunity. And obviously now with COVID, we expect to see, even more.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I knew this because I came and toured last summer. I was doing a
Mhm.
national compass tour of all these markets, and Michael was very aware that I was from the South and needed to do a little bit of that Southern hospitality. So
Mhm.
we went to his house. We watched the Mets play. And of course, I'm a Braves fan, so he hates that about us. But it was really interesting to learn from you how New York is always sort of the leading indicator of the rest of the country, at least historically, right? And so it's in a buyer's market. It's now in a stronger buyer's market. I think I don't know what you think. I believe that Atlanta will be a stronger seller's market in 2021 than it was going to be
Mhm.
as a result of this, because of the strain on inventory.
Well, beyond that, I read the Federal Reserve chairman from one of the other Federal Reserve regions said this week that it's about employment, and the strongest employment markets will recover and be just fine. And we've got other problems in the ones that won't have strong employment markets. And that could be those 20th century cities that, have been losing manufacturing for years anyway. So it could get very hard, but not in Atlanta. And I don't think in New York for sure. It's
Well,
just,
I'll tell you, I read something I thought was interesting a few weeks back. I read that the expectation from a bunch of these banks was that the markets that will have the hardest time coming back quickly, at least, are the markets where most people use public transportation for commuting in the cities. So there was a chart, right? And I think the chart said 34% of New Yorkers use public transportation. The next highest city was San Francisco, and it was like 14%.
yeah.
And then I don't know what that number is in Atlanta, but I assume most people are driving in Atlanta. I could
Less than
tell you like
10%.
Miami was like 3% or 4%. And I think
Yeah.
most of you guys are probably like that, right?
Right,
Yes.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
it makes it easier, right? There's a big difference between
That's
hopping
huge.
in your car that
That's
you know
huge.
is clean and like you're not sitting next to somebody that potentially could be sick, versus getting on these subway trains. I mean, in New York, they started shutting the subways down for I forget what it is, maybe 6 hours a night overnight to clean them every night now. And this has never happened before. They've literally never done it.
Wow.
So
They were
in
breeding.
summary, the more you rely on public transportation, the harder the recovery, which speaks to higher housing density, right? Just in general.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you do business in New Jersey?
I don't, but I actually live in New Jersey now. I live just outside the city in Hoboken.
Hoboken.
Yeah, Hoboken.
I've spent about 15 nights in Hoboken.
Oh yeah?
I'm not going to ask why.
It's an 80s and 90s thing. Grateful Dead concerts, seeing buddies from college, all that. That buddies lived in Short Hills, Tenafly, Hoboken, Milton.
Lee's a big New York fan, by the way. It's one of his favorite
That's my
cities in the
favorite
world,
city
Mike.
in
You
the
got to
world.
host Lee. He's going to be sent as the Wieloch Group's ambassador.
Yeah, when concerts come back and, we can go see a show or something at, I don't know, whatever the Hammerstein Ballroom is nowadays. That would be cool. Or Madison Square Garden, of course.
I love it. I love it. Definitely. You're welcome up here anytime.
You're a DJ too, right? I read that you're a DJ.
I was a DJ. I have not
Once
done
a
it.
DJ, always a DJ. So is Robert Refkin, right?
Exactly. I will say that at the moment, I'm not even kidding about this. If I were to turn the computer camera around, you would see that my DJ equipment is currently on my dining room table, because along with having some extra time on my hands, I decided it might be a good idea to pull this stuff out after years of being in the back of a closet.
Oh my God, I'm going to do it too. That's awesome. Is it our turntables?
No, it is like the digital turntable. It's hooked up to one of the systems, but it's
that's
all
pretty cool. Well, I didn't mean to get too distracted, but no, I read in New Jersey that about 8 of their counties are on the top 50 list of foreclosures that are going to go up. And we were just talking about the cities and places that are going to get hurt. Yeah. And I think New Jersey is going to be having some tough times, not only Atlantic City, but the tougher to come back cities.
Yeah.
For a lot of counties they mentioned.
I grew up in Jersey, and I can tell you that, every part of Jersey is pretty different. So like they really try and divide it into North, Central, and South Jersey. So Atlantic City, which, I like to go to once in a blue moon, is it's a drive. It's like a few hours from where I live. And that it's been pretty dilapidated down there for a long time, unfortunately. But it's
thank you, Trump. Thank you, Mr. President.
But some of the towns that you mentioned earlier, like Short Hills, I mean, those are really sort of expensive, very nice New Jersey suburbs. Where I live is more urban. Just literally, I'm a 6 or 7 minute drive into the city. It is a small city, and what's happening. That statistic doesn't completely surprise me, but I was talking about this with Jason the other day. I think unfortunately the change in the tax plan several years ago now, at this point, 2 or 3 years ago, does have a negative impact on a lot of the Northeast, New Jersey. So New Jersey and Long Island and Westchester, right? Mm-hmm. Those 3 places have the 5 most expensive zip codes in the country for real estate taxes.
Yeah.
And so, Westchester's number 1, I think Essex and Bergen in Jersey, and then like Nassau and Suffolk in Long Island. So all of the closest suburbs to New York City, when you have these high state income taxes, and then if you live in the city, you have a city tax also, with the cap on the SALT deductions, it makes a pretty big difference. And so, we'll see what happens, but there just might generally be a greater trend of people moving out of the Northeast and to cities that are more affordable, which I think could be a boon to Atlanta. I have family down there that actually left New York City and moved to Atlanta at this point 20 plus years ago. They mounted themselves over in Roswell and raised their kids there.
Y'all are welcome down here. Come get you a homestead.
Yeah. I'm not surprised by hearing that, Mike. That's very interesting to think about, but I'll sit up here and talk.
Lee's got to speak.
That's very interesting what you said, and we call it domestic migration, Jason. That's what we call it.
It is. It's like manifest destiny, except it's south instead of west.
Yeah, I think that cities like Austin, Nashville are hot. My hometown of Greenville, South Carolina is hot. Charlotte is relative, and Raleigh, the Triangle, are hot for employment.
It's the Sun Belt.
And then there's Florida, but there's things that go on in Florida. Yeah,
right. Florida man,
like in the Everglades.
You know about Florida man.
So I think everyone's talking about 15% unemployment, right? So how do you think that directly impacts New York? Because locally here in Atlanta, I think it really is going to, more than anything, I think this crisis will impact entry-level housing more than anything, because a lot of people at service level jobs, waiters, restaurant, let's call it the gig economy workers. A lot of times they're buying entry-level housing, or even first-time home buyers that don't get jobs right out of college, and it delays their ability to save and buy a home, right? I think probably in the higher end, and unfortunately when recessions happen, the rich a lot of times get richer on the other side, right? So I think that it's a very divergent answer here in Atlanta, which is the same thing post 2008. We'll talk about that in a second too. How do you think ultimately, from Manhattan real estate or even Brooklyn, the boroughs you work, how do you think unemployment's going to impact y'all?
So, look, anecdotally, my wife and I have a number of friends who have lost their jobs. Most of them, thankfully, have been furloughed rather than a full loss of their job. But, we certainly have some people. My wife works in the fashion industry. Her assistant was laid off. And I think something like, if I'm not mistaken, 60% of her company was let go for the time being, at least. I think the intention is that they're going to be able to hire these people back, hopefully. But they are a company that manufactures in China, and they were having problems shipping early, and then after things kind of came over here, a lot of the stores that they sell to big department stores started canceling their orders, which makes sense. Malls are closed and department stores are closed in most places. So I think that, generally speaking, you certainly see a lot of the unemployment. I think it affects things differently up here than down there. Like the people you were talking about, the gig employees, they don't buy up here. Like the barrier to entry is just way too high to buy. So maybe it affects the rental market a little bit. It'll be interesting because I'm literally, over these last few days of getting these calls on my rental properties, getting people that are saying, some people are not bringing up price at all. Other people are saying, hey, given the situation, is there room on these prices? But we just posted these, and I was the one who set the prices in combination with the landlord. And I have to tell you, we're setting prices on the rental properties either at or slightly above where they rented for last time, which was, in any case, a year or two ago. So we feel confident at the moment that we're still going to be able to maintain the rental prices we are looking at. But on the sales end of things, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Look, there's without a doubt going to be a segment of the market who had the money to buy, right? Had the money in the stock market, and like the rest of the world, lost a portion of that money. Obviously, it's coming back a little bit, which is great news. But they've lost some of their money, and maybe they don't have quite as much liquid as they had before. So that'll be a portion of it. But I do think that most people who were intent on buying are still going to buy.
If I'm selling in New York, why would I do it now?
You wouldn't. To be honest,
have a realtor. I want to quote this realtor on the air. He said, "Do not sell."
It's true. Look, I try and run.
That's why you hire this guy. He's honest.
Yeah. I try and run my business honestly. The reality of it is, look, the real answer is this: if you need to sell for whatever reason, or if you feel like New York City real estate is going to slide worse, then it makes sense to sell now, right? Or, and I think this is sort of the better situation, and a conversation I'm having with a lot of my clients. If you were going to upgrade, if you were in a 2-bedroom or a 1-bedroom home in New York City, and you were going to be buying a 3-bedroom home, then it makes sense to sell, because it's a net win, right? You're going to lose a little bit money on the sale.
Talk about that all the time.
And when the next apartment's more expensive, you're coming out a winner.
Great move up market.
Really situation. Yeah.
It's a good cash out market too for people who want cash right now.
I don't know about in New York.
It is in Atlanta.
Atlanta's a good cash out market. I think in your market, you guys you were telling me what you bought 3 or 4 years ago. In some cases, in the high end, is worth what, 20+% less, Mike?
Yeah. So the numbers generally should look like this, right? Prior to COVID, we were down around 10 to 15%. With COVID, nobody knows what'll happen. And like you guys, like when you go into contract on something, right? You can close super quick. What's your time frame from a signed contract to closing?
I mean, probably average is 30 days, 30 to 45 days. And this is so funny because I felt like we would lose time to even get into the real parallels of New York and Atlanta beyond just prices. You guys traditionally don't have an MLS.
Nope.
You have a search platform that everyone uses. It's called, is it Street? What is it called? Is it Street Easy?
Street Easy is a public-facing website that's owned by Zillow Group.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's where everybody goes. So you had these really, you brokers up there just didn't get along the last 100 years, didn't form an MLS. So fighting for all the listings. And then I don't know how you get away with this, but the real estate agents don't even have to write the contracts there. The attorney writes the contract. You guys you're basically just playing real estate matchmaker.
They're marketers.
You're a matchmaker.
Yes. Yeah, that's accurate. So the MLS stuff is a little bit off. What the story is that we don't have a formal MLS, right? But we do have an internal system. So there is a governing body up here called REBNY, the Real Estate Board of New York. And almost all legitimate brokers in New York City are members of REBNY. And if you're members of REBNY, then there is a system called the RLS, which acts like the MLS. We all insert our listings, we all co-broke, we send it out. So for example, up here in New York, the 3 biggest firms are Compass, Corcoran, and Elliman. And if an Elliman agent gets a listing, we see it within an hour. And so we do have that sort of similar system in that respect. It's just not a formal MLS,
right?
And it's run through REBNY. And there are non-REBNY brokers, small ones usually, that don't have to put their stuff out there to co-broke the listings. Street Easy is not a brokerage. They're just a platform. They were started, they built a good business. They were purchased by the Zillow Group. And it's sort of like we're frenemies with Street Easy in the sense that, brokers still use their tools, but we don't love some of the things that they're implementing. And so but in fairness, at the moment, at least, and companies like Compass are trying to sort of, usurp this. Street Easy is probably the number one place that the average New York person looking for an apartment goes. But more and more apartments are starting to come off of Street Easy and be put just onto Compass's website, Element's website, Corcoran's website.
Last little mini topic for you, Mike, and I know 2008, totally different story. Do you see any parallels between now and then with what's happening? On one hand, the total opposite is supply was an issue then, meaning there was way too much of it. I can't speak to you guys. Supply here is very low. So that in a sense is helping sustain us. On the other hand, it's the credit side of things that really feels eerily similar. The minimum requirements for a loan, whether it's the credit score, or the reserves needed, the upfront down payment, et cetera. That a little bit is familiar to me, at least the feeling. What parallels do you see, if any?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the talk up here is really that this feels a little bit like a hybrid between the financial crisis and, post 9/11 a little bit. It's, those were the last 2 times that we really saw the market come down in New York in a significant way. Obviously, very different scenarios, a gigantic, national crisis with 9/11, but, very specific at the same time towards New York because it's where, we got hit. And the financial crisis, which was, financial, right? Two different things, but we're seeing sort of a hybrid here. So, because we were already in a buyer's market, just to touch on the credit thing. I mean, credit's a little bit different. Like getting a loan up here is a little bit different, right? We have a lot of places that are co-ops. Co-ops have much stricter standards than the banks do for giving out loans. So in the past, that has helped us to avoid the type of foreclosure numbers that you would see outside of New York City, because you literally could not buy with a subprime mortgage in New York City.
Mhm.
Even just in terms of down payments, like I find that most banks, like, if you're dealing with the large banks, Bank of America, Chase, whatever, Wells Fargo, they're not loaning better than an 80-20 ratio on
Loan
a
to value,
condo
right?
building or a co-op building in New York City, whereas maybe you can get 90-10 or even 95-5 in other places. So I don't think the mortgage market is going to play a big role in this. I don't think we're going to see people who have a problem there. There may be people who lost liquidity in the stock market that are forced to sell. What I can tell you is, like, the numbers look like this. There are currently 5,000. There's just over 5,000 apartments on the market in New York right now. There's usually over 7,000, right? So it means we're about 30% off of the typical amount of apartments on the market. There were 2,650 pending sales when this thing started 8 weeks ago. We're now at 2,250. That makes sense because sales are closing, but there's not that many going into contract. New inventory, right? We were at a low in new inventory coming on the market 4 weeks ago. We had literally only 70 new listings in New York City 4 weeks ago. We're now at 105, which is a good sign. People are starting to put things on the market. However, that should be 400. So we're at about a quarter of what it should be. Contracts signed this past week were 36. That should have been around 250. It was at 136 8 weeks ago when this started, and 192 apartments were taken off the market this week. They were at 117, which was the low 3 weeks ago, but this going up is a bad sign. So it's kind of mixed messages, right? Like, more apartments are going off the market, which is a bad sign, but the new inventory is up. So more people are putting their apartments on the market, but more people are also taking them off the market. Either way, none of this is great news, but we're hoping that, those numbers start to trend in a more positive direction. And I suspect they will, the closer we get to opening things up.
Lee, any final thoughts? I love this conversation.
This is really great. I love talking about New York. This is really
I do
cool.
too.
I have a question about the word apartments and how you guys call it. This would fall under the condominium category for us, right? Is that what you're kind of measuring?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
when we're talking about these numbers, right? In New York, you're either buying like a multifamily or where a building that has 8 units or 16 units. Most of those are not what we're referring to. We're also not referring to single family townhouses in these numbers because they're just very different. But the majority of what you buy in New York are none of those. Most of them are condos and co-ops. So that's
Co-ops.
what we're referring to in rent.
And we have like 3 co-ops in the whole city of Atlanta. I mean, really. But
Well,
hey, thank you for coming on today. It was really, really cool to talk to you. I look forward to meeting you one day.
Mike,
Yeah, absolutely. I really
so
appreciate
great.
it, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, man. I got to get back up there and got to go out.
You need to buy a condo in Hell's Kitchen.
I'm going to get my hazmat soon. We're going to go out in Manhattan real soon.
Sounds good, man.
Everybody out there in podcast land, appreciate y'all on another episode of Due Diligence. Next week, we have a very special guest, extremely excited, and it's Assam Ahmed, who is the New York Times bureau chief for Mexico, Central America, client of ours, great friend as well. He's going to talk about COVID and how it's affected Mexico City and the surrounding areas, another very dense city, and we might get a little testimonial or feedback on the air about his real estate experience in Atlanta. Hopefully it'll be good. But for those of you out there that are listening, I hope you're enjoying the new format with live guests. And if you need a New York City agent, call Michael Sandak. And Mike, quickly, before we depart, how do they reach you?
You can email me at msandak@compass.com. We're also on Instagram, the Sandak Team NYC. Feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear from you. And again, thank you guys so much for having me on.
Awesome. And if you all want to rewatch this, you can go to wielochgroup.com as always and find all of our archived episodes on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, basically anywhere. If you can't find us, then I'm concerned for you. But thanks, buddy. Appreciate you coming on. And thank you everybody for listening on another episode of Due Diligence.
See you, Mike. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.